like we've kind of grown up a little bit together. Where, you know, I've gone from a civil project coordinator to where I am now, and you know, look at the growth and the success that you've had at Applin. Like, we both have young kids that are around the same age, and bond over that. And the people behind the company has kind of been lifted, and we have that kind of personal bond first, and grown together, and that just it just makes picking up a phone call and having tough conversations a hell of a lot easier, because there's a person behind that. And we've dealt with some pretty difficult projects together, and we've kind of grown through them together. And I think just having that kind of personal relationship first has helped a lot.
Welcome back to the workshop presented by Applin Martin. On today's episode, I'm joined by two gentlemen who have been working in the land development scene in BC, and from opposite sides of the table in the form of client and consultant. Tom Woodward, Senior Manager of Civil and Infrastructure of Wesgroup, and Robert Lew, Manager of Vancouver Engineering of Applin Martin. Tom and Robert have known each other for many years in various roles within the industry. Today, we dive into the variables that make a successful, efficient, and long-lasting client-consultant relationship. It was awesome to hear Tom and Robert share their history, working relationship, and stories within the civil field, and I hope you all enjoy.
Robert Lew and Tom Woodward, how are you guys today?
Doing good.
Good, yeah. Awesome. Robert, welcome back, second time on. So I'm not going to bore the audience kind of again with your story and your background.
No, fair.
But Tom, I'll focus on you. If you want to give me a brief background about yourself, how long you've been in the industry, where'd you go to school?
Sure, yeah. I've been in the development construction related industry for 12-ish years now. I'd worked in infrastructure construction prior to that. I worked for a small municipality for 5 years. Prior to that, school, I went to UBC. I was, it's funny because my undergraduate education has no relevance to what I do now. Like probably a lot of people.
Hey, same here.
I actually, when I was going to school, I did a background in psychology, and I actually wanted to be involved in concussion research.
Interesting.
So yeah, I was a rugby player growing up, and dealt with concussions myself. Wanted to work in concussion research. Finished university. Wanted to work in a lab. Got a summer job while I was trying to work through that process, and I started building water systems for a small municipality. Just as like, you know, you
just a natural transition, concussion water, okay.
Totally. And it was like just a job, you know, it was just a job to make money. And I ended up just doing it for years. I did it for 5 years, like between summers at university and a few years afterwards. Once I did that for a few years, I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed building infrastructure. I enjoyed seeing new construction on the ground and being involved in that. And I knew I wanted to kind of grow in that field. I went back to school to do construction project management, and then I ended up getting my PMP.
Okay.
From there you're like, okay, you know, it's nice to be on the municipal side and to build infrastructure and watch infrastructure grow and be involved in that. But I mean, working for a municipality when you're 25, 26 years old, it gets a little slow.
Yeah. A lot of downtime.
Yeah, a lot of downtime. And it you know, when you're young and you're full of ambition, you want to grow it. And I kind of was in a point where I was like, well, where can I take all of this? And just, you know, I started looking on the development side. And that's where I actually started my career on the development construction side with Ani. And I started with them in 2014.
Okay.
And I worked, I was hired as a coordinator on the construction side, mostly focused on civil projects, and they wanted to build out civil.
Yeah.
And really it just grew from there. So I was at Ani for almost 10 years. Taking on larger, more complex projects with Ani, during my time there, I think there were some big changes in the real estate market at that time. Namely, it was exploding. The real estate market at that time was getting just bigger and bigger, and people were taking on more projects and bigger projects. A lot of it used to be, you'd build a tower and you'd plug in your services and call it a day. But just even in a time of such great growth in Vancouver, the infrastructure is what lagged behind. And it often became the laggard on a project. Yep. And I think I kind of developed a nice little niche at Ani where, we knew we wanted to build big. We had really complex projects, and we had project managers that were very focused on building the building. And what often fell behind was the infrastructure requirements.
What actually gets into the building?
How are we actually building the infrastructure to support these developments?
Yep.
And so there was kind of just something I jumped into head first was, look, like this is a real problem in our market. Like with these jobs are not getting less complex. Yep. In fact, they're getting more complex. There are more stakeholders at the table. There are more people that want to have their say in design and approval of permits. And the cowboy days were kind of over at that time. Pair that with the amount of construction that was happening at the time, and you've got a full plate right there. So I grew at Ani, a company that they themselves expanded greatly with the market, and kind of developed this niche role where I was always the one looking at the civil and infrastructure build.
Okay.
Well, you were basically like heading up that whole kind of new department or new realm.
Yeah, and one of the great things about Ani is they've got they have a sink or swim mindset there, but if you swim, they'll give you a lot to swim with, and it became a point where it was like Rob said, you started almost as heading up your own division, where they were like, great, like this is a problem in our market overall. You seem like you can handle it, so we're just gonna keep giving you more. We're just gonna keep giving you more and more and more, and my role just kind of grew out of that.
Okay.
I think. Like I said, the complexities of the civil and infrastructure world also were a big part of that. Like I said, there's no easy building anymore.
Yeah.
So civil and infrastructure become a huge demand on a project.
Yeah. It's an interesting story, I guess, how you started, again, completely on one side. And then, so it was just that basically that your water building or your water design, or I guess your first job, that was strictly just because you needed a summer thing to do.
Yeah, totally. It was like, my dad works for the District of West Vancouver.
Okay.
And so I knew about municipal work, and I jumped into it, and it was great to be involved in something tangible. You'd see progress at the end of the day. We'd build out water and sanitary systems, and you could physically track progress and see success at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
and
were you designing or were you building?
No, building.
You're digging.
You were actually in the, that's what was going to be my next question. Was like, what do you mean to build?
In a lot of ways, I was effectively a pipe layer.
You're right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. And it turned from like being a pipe layer into, being a manager of a crew.
Right.
And planning out and building water and sanitary systems.
That was Bowen Island, right?
Yeah. And an island that has a ton of development going on right now. Like the population over there is booming, and they're always building. And so we were always so busy. Right. And, I think I realized pretty quick, I guess maybe there's a bit of an ego involved where it was like, well, I can run this. Like,
I've been in the hole. I know what to do.
I don't need a 50-year-old guy with no real ambition to tell me what to do. I've got a head on my shoulders. I can figure this out. Yeah. And then it came a point where, I realized that this is something that I want to do long term, is be involved in infrastructure builds. And I didn't know, I mean, even still to this day, I don't know where all this is going to go. But like at the time, I didn't know where it would lead me. I just knew that it was something I wanted to be involved in and wanted to grow in.
Man, what a start.
Yeah.
And now look at you.
Yeah, I know.
That was gonna be, okay. So yeah, we'll transition to that now. So what current role do you hold?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, actually, I just had my second year anniversary at Wesgroup. So 2 years ago, I moved on from Ani and I joined Wesgroup. My title at Wesgroup is Senior Civil and Infrastructure Manager. My day-to-day over there kind of is all over the map. I think probably the best way to describe it is if you have a development and you're building a tower or you're building a 6-story wood frame or a tilt-up style warehouse, anything outside of the building line will fall under my hat. So
Controlled chaos.
Yeah, 100%. And if it's, on the, and what the team that I work with kind of runs tip to tail through the development process when you are looking at things like owner obligations and your servicing agreement requirements, rezoning requirements, through to design creation, design approval, permitting, to construction and asset management. Like we're involved, my team at Wesgroup is involved from tip to tail. I was joking with Rob earlier, I kind of straddle the fence between development and construction and sit on both sides. So we have a say really early in the process. And it's our job to pick up all things civil, infrastructure, earthworks, environmental, literally anything outside of the meat and potatoes building construction tends to fall under my hat.
Very cool. And what kind of projects then would you say you've worked on in the past 2 years then from Wesgroup? Like if you want to highlight them.
Yeah, so one of Wesgroup's crown jewels is our River District site, which is about 140 acres on the north arm of the Fraser. It's a really, really exciting master plan community out there. The site is, it was a former mill, and from that we are building, we're literally city building out there. We have towers, we have mixed use, commercial and residential, and from the days of the mill to what we want to build now, it's literally a blank canvas. So the services that need to be constructed in there, the environmental works that need to take place on the north arm of the Fraser, road building, storm sanitary water, hydro shottel, offsite landscaping, everything outside of the building line, we're literally building out there. And if you ever stand on a site that's 140 acres and you look and you stare from one side of it to the other side, you go, holy crap, that's a lot of land.
A lot of space.
That's a lot of land. And the infrastructure to support what's effectively going to become a city. It's pretty immense. And that's a project that when I came over to Wesgroup was really, really exciting. To be involved working with the city of Vancouver and building out the backbone infrastructure, kind of the lifeblood of that site, is really cool. And there's a lot of really interesting challenges with River District. There are portions of the site that are contaminated. And so managing massive portions of complexities around dealing with contaminated soils, dealing with contaminated water, the legislation that surrounds that, city bylaws, trying to come up with just innovative solutions to solve a contamination problem is really, really interesting and very complex, and there's no easy answers to any of it. So Wesgroup seems to make a habit of building from really big sites. They're probably their specialty is building master plans. And infrastructure has a huge part of that.
Yeah. And that's good. Great to hear again, because again, like the massive complexities that you've just mentioned, and the size of the teams and the amount of consultants that you guys probably have to use is a large number. And again, you'll probably need to bring in, again, multiple consultants. And Robert being one of them here, I don't know if he's working on that specific project,
Not currently.
but you guys have worked together in the past.
Yes,
I'd like to bring you guys back in now together. And that's kind of what I wanted to discuss is kind of this client-consultant relationship and how it works. So if you guys want to start from how you guys first met.
Yeah,
back in the
well,
past.
we were just talking about that before recording, but so yeah, what is the
What's on the record of the first time that we met? We don't even know. So my recollection of the first time we met is different than yours.
Yeah.
I first remember we did a job together on 59th and Cambie, on East Cambie Gardens project, which is again a very complex project. Not so much because perhaps the construction is complex, but there are a lot of stakeholders at the table on a project like that.
I mean, it is complex from a civil point of view. We had that central tank and like the
that's
rainwater
right.
design was pretty complex.
And working around storm and sewer separation is there's a lot of meat on the bone. But like when I think of that site, the thing that stands out to me most is the fact that like, between the city, Metro Vancouver, Ani, BC Hydro, Shaw, there's just a lot of stakeholders that are at the table on a job like that. And working in existing roadways in the city of Vancouver is never easy because there's a smorgasbord of existing utilities underneath those roads that you've got to manage. And when you're doing a big sewer separation, like space comes to premium pretty darn quick and makes the civil designer's job pretty difficult.
Yeah.
So my first memory of meeting Rob was the pre-con meeting for that. And having every majority of those stakeholders at the table and Rob having to manage that is my first memory. And perhaps probably because I just sat back and was like, there's a lot of people at this meeting.
Well, let someone else kind of.
Hopefully Rob's got it. The city of Vancouver.
See, I don't even remember that. I blocked it out of my memory.
Yeah, but your memory's a little. You remember meeting me earlier.
At the Ani office, we were called into a meeting, and then we were talking with James Smith, and then I think it was a hydro thing too, where he had us, BC Hydro, Telus and Shaw, and just like basically pushing us, encouraging us to get our acts together and get coordinated and all that stuff. And then they pulled Tom into the meeting to be the civil, the guy from Audi that understood civil. So that was our first meeting. You didn't say much in that meeting. I probably didn't say much in that meeting.
I said to Rob, I think I remember the meeting, but I think I had never even been involved in the project yet. They're like, They're like, come on in this meeting. There's something to do.
Something's going on over there.
Gotta listen in. Come on in.
Well, I remember Tom as the comforting presence in that. he wasn't.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that kind of epitomizes how my role for developers has evolved in the sense that one of my main roles is to be that kind of intermediary between the developer and the civil engineer, because one of the difficult aspects about being a civil engineer for developers is so much of the design is not your say.
Yeah.
Right? We can go back, a developer can go back to the architect and go, well, I don't like it designed like that. So
change it. Yeah.
Or, we want more power, or we want, we don't want to build it like this. That conversation doesn't go very well in the civil world. No. We don't want to build it like this, or this doesn't look very good, doesn't exist.
I think the level of trust the developer has to have in the civil consultant in particular I think it's a higher bar, because there's so much that you wouldn't, or the typical developer wouldn't be familiar with, and all this jargon and rules, and they're well versed in building a building, but the civil infrastructure is a whole different beast.
I think it puts more onus on your group to break it down, right, and to make it digestible for developers, and that's where, like you said, the trust has to come in. It's like, look, our rainwater detention tank has to be this big because of the rainwater requirements from the SWMP requirements from the city, or you have to have a certain amount of wall-to-wall clearance between these utilities, so it has to be spread out like this. 9 times out of 10, developer isn't going to understand, or isn't going to want to understand that. Oftentimes they just want to know when it's done and how can they save them money. And
I was going to say, what's the dollar amount at the end?
And so to be able to kind of help guide developers through that process, you need a really strong relationship with the civil engineer, somebody who's willing to take the time to explain that to you why it's a requirement, and what's the best way that we can attack that, even though we as the developer might not have the ultimate say.
Yeah, and it like from the civil consultant's point of view, that can be a very nerve-wracking process. Like to tell the client, hey, by the way, you're gonna lose like 3 feet off your parkade now because of this rule that you don't understand. That I'm explaining to you right now, and you have a blind trust in me that I'm doing everything correctly, right? Or the flip side where it's like, no, that can't be the case. Go back and argue with the city, and we're like, I can't.
There's just no, it's a no. Yeah,
and developers are really good at that, where they'll go, well, just go argue it, and just go and I'm sure you'll come up with a creative solution, and they put the onus all on you to say, well, make miracles here, and when you don't have the ultimate say on design, that's really difficult to do. And I think that's where a big part of my role comes in, is, like I said, kind of being that intermediary between the developer and the civil engineer, as someone where, we can balance the needs of both what the project requires and what those external stakeholders, whether it be the city or Metro Vancouver or BC Hydro, require, and how can we kind of marry those two?
Yeah. So now I know you guys talked about a little bit about kind of your partnership and stuff, and but what do you think makes what you guys do together successful to the highest degree outside of just the trust? Is there something in your relationship that it's like, okay, I know Robert's gonna say pick up the phone at this time, or same thing back to you, like, hey, I have this amount of comfortability that I don't mind telling Tom, hey, by the way, there's this thing that might be going on. It might be a day or two late. Like, is there something in your relationship that you think makes projects run smoothly between you two?
I think you actually, when you're up in my office, you characterize it pretty well, which is like, we never felt like we were two different people working for two different companies. And it's like almost like it's just Tom and I working on this problem or project together. And it's almost as if like we are coworkers, and like that level of relationship. So like, obviously, like you touched on it too, Julian, which is like the relationship and that level of communication, and like just being able to pick up the phone, call Tom, picks up the phone, calls me. I think in particular, Tom, glazy a little bit here, is like one of the things that made it really comfortable and easy to work with you was like you would listen to the whole spiel first and then like wait and then try to process it. And it was like clear that you were trying to process it rather than just like, push the agenda and push the developer byline. So that definitely made things easier, especially like, I mean, this project, we didn't talk about when we started working together on this. It must be in like 2018.
Yeah.
So that was like, I was just a project engineer at that stage. So I was still finding my feet and trying to figure this thing out.
It's funny you say that, because that's one of the things that jumped out to my head was in a lot of ways 2018 is not a lifetime ago, but like we've kind of grown up a little bit together.
Yeah.
Where, I've gone from a civil project coordinator to where I am now, and look at the growth and the success that you've had at Applin. Like, we both have young kids that are around the same age, and bond over that, and the people behind the company has kind of been lifted, and we have that kind of personal bond first, and grown together, and that just it just makes picking up a phone call and having tough conversations a hell of a lot easier, because there's a person behind that, and we've dealt with some pretty difficult projects together, and we've kind of grown through them together, and I think just having that kind of personal relationship first has helped a lot, because there's so much of civil and infrastructure building that is out of your control, that you need to find a common ground to build off of.
Yeah.
So now you just mentioned it as well. You guys have worked on some pretty difficult projects, and I assume with that there are definitely a lot of challenges that kind of come along during the project process. What are some typical client consultant challenges that you guys face, and do you guys have a specific way of kind of working through them other than just, you know what I mean? Like I said, the clear communication path.
I can take that one first.
I feel like you might have a lot more to complain about that. So go ahead. I can give you 10, 15, 20 minutes.
One of the jobs that we both have kind of cut our teeth on is out at Tawasin First Nations. It's again, Ani had a 140 acre master plan out there. Again, I don't know why I only do
That's
140
140. It's all
acres,
140.
something like that. And a large master plan. And the thing with working out at TFN is they're growing up fast. They have a lot of development happening on TFN lands, and they have I don't know if emerging is the right word for their engineering department, developing, growing up engineering department. And they have a lot of asks. They have a lot of requirements, and it's not so by the book. You work in the city of Burnaby, city of Vancouver. You have a general understanding what design guidelines look like. Yeah. You have some goalposts to build and design off of. It doesn't really exist that way at TFN. It's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, I'd say it's like by the book, but they're writing the book.
There's an eraser as you go along. Okay. It's in pencil.
Wait to turn the next page to see what the design guideline is. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just inherently with that, there's a lot of trial and error in the design and construction process. So, I mean, if you don't have a good relationship with your civil engineer and you don't have that kind of ability to pick up the phone and go, yeah, I mean, this is really tough, but this is going to be a really tough conversation to have. But here's where we're coming from. Here's why the design's changing. Yeah. Here's where that request has come from, and I can show you and explain it to you and have you understand it so that you can explain it to your team. That was a big strength of Apple Martins, is to be able to kind of help us navigate through an engineering and government that there's a lot of changes happening really quickly on the fly.
Yeah.
I'd add to that too, where like a big challenge that it's like we constantly face and is something, I agree that we do pretty well is, characterizing like when you're doing engineering, it's all like trade-offs and pluses and minuses. And when you deal with municipal guidelines that are not necessarily set in stone, or you've got to break a rule here and there, you start dealing with like risk and probabilities. And, as engineers, it's often hard for us to understand where to draw the line of like a decision that we'll make a call on and advise the client versus a decision we'll bring to the client and get them into. And that's why the relationship's so important, where it can be scary as a civil engineer to bring the choice to your client because you almost feel like you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
But then understanding that line and having that clear communication is, I understood that line with Tom very clearly. So it's easy for me to say, okay, this is a call that he'd want me to make. Oh, this is something that he'd want me to bring to him and help him understand the risks and rewards and the different paths and options. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, again, just perhaps highlighting the value of maybe even having somebody like me working for a developer, in the sense that, so often the building team, they don't even want to know. Again, like I said, goes back to how quick can you get it done and what's it going to cost me? But like, you need to really dig into understanding the why behind it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that Apple Martin does really, really well. Yeah, is explain the why. And I think that's probably one of my biggest things whenever I'm working with a civil engineer. And like I said, one of the strengths with Applin is like explain the why behind it, because you have to understand you're not just explaining it to me, you're explaining it to my stakeholders, you're explaining it to a team that they just want to know when it's done and how much it's going to cost them. So, if I can't explain your messaging well enough, well, then, you probably haven't done a good enough job explaining it to me. And I don't typically have those problems with Applin. Mm-hmm. And to be able, and I think that goes back to being able to like pick up the phone and bond over some of the difficulties of the job, and then let's get into problem solving from there.
Yeah. And now I kind of want to highlight, now I know you guys have talked about now when you guys have worked on projects together, but now from an outsider perspective, say, how has being able to have, say, I don't want to call you guys are industry experts, how has that partnership outside of projects been able to kind of help other leadership decisions on projects? Say if you're able to be like, oh, Robert, have you seen something like this before? Same thing to Tom. Be like, oh, we have this interesting situation kind of with another client. Have you had that expertise? Do you guys kind of have that relationship, and how has it grown to that point?
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure you sent me a few questions here and there when you first started at Wesgroup.
Yeah.
Especially, and then Ani too is like questions about projects outside of the ones we were working on. And that's part of our job too, is like to make sure that's client service 101. We're there to help in any way possible. So I think having that candid relationship where, you can text me, I can text you, which is how I got you to agree to this thing.
I don't know what you said to him on such a short notice. I'm going to say yes, but
it was a pretty simple text. I remember I was kind of drunk when I wrote this. I put enough thought into to make it enticing, but it's that level of comfortability is like he doesn't feel bad to text me after hours, and he knows that I don't view it as a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and credit to Rob and the things that he's built here, but like Applin's an industry leader on the civil engineering side, especially on land development projects, right? Like you have to be able to kind of push what's innovative and go outside of the typical, status quo in civil and infrastructure and land development, construction in the Lower Mainland and beyond. And so, I wouldn't be doing my job if when a particular problem arises on any development that relates to my world, if I wasn't picking up the phone and speaking to those people who are like the industry experts, the industry leaders, the people who are most willing to kind of push outside the box, right? And so, again, having somebody that you can trust that can, even if I come up with some harebrained idea based off of my very limited knowledge of civil design, and I know that I can call Rob and go, that's a pretty stupid idea.
Maybe
save that one and then forget that conversation ever happened. But you need to be able to trust people who are not just knowledgeable enough to be an industry leader, but also creative enough to go, you know what, that's an interesting and different problem. Have you thought about it this way?
Right.
Have you flipped the other side of the coin over and thought about thought about this unique way of looking at the problem? And that's, again, with Apple Martin being kind of that leader in the land development industry right now, it's a super valuable relationship to have.
Yeah. I'll add to that too. Kind of on the flip side of that is the one way the comfortability and the relationship helps too is if Tom calls me and asks a question that I don't know the answer to, I'm not shy to tell him, hey, I don't know the answer right now. Let me get back to you, right? Or give me a week to kind of like source out some answers. I don't feel like the pressure to like give him a sounds good answer, but it turns out to be wrong, which is not useful to him at all. So
well, I think that goes back to like we're just two people trying to solve problems.
Exactly.
Right? Like the client professional relationship is a little bit out the window. It's like, hey, here's a unique problem. Let's try to solve it together.
Yeah, put your brains together, and at the end of the day, you guys both have the same common goal, right? Is
exactly
to build it.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now looking towards kind of the future between Wesgroup and Applin and kind of the projects, where do you guys see this future partnership going, and what kind of exciting projects do you guys have in the future?
Well, right now, I mean, Tom, you're working with Don and Kathy mostly for your inlet.
Inlet District's a super
Inlet
exciting one. It's 60 single family homes in Port Moody that we're turning into 9 towers. I think it's 14-ish acres. And it's in Port Moody, it's a municipality that desperately needs to grow up.
Yeah.
I mean, they're transit fed, they're close to the water, they're close to, every amenity you can think of, whether it be, lakes or walking trails or forests. And it's been a sleepy little village forever that is now getting so much development coming to it. And on the civil and infrastructure side, like I said, it was single family homes that Apple Martin has the unenviable task into trying to support 9 towers on.
Right.
And so the infrastructure improvements are huge.
Yeah.
And like Kathy specifically has done an amazing job of having to come up with a design that's feasible. And believe me, we've chopped that design apart.
Right.
He's like, it's gone through the woodwork.
Yeah,
He's gone through the woodshed.
and to negotiate that with again, a little bit of shades of TFN, working through an engineering team that I don't know if they want to be taking on as much work as they should be. They have to. So that's one that really excites me because, again, similar to our River District project, you feel like you're city building. You feel like you're like really involved in the growth of that city.
Yeah. Well, you literally are.
And it
exciting.
needs it. And it's cool to be a part of a job where you go out there and you go, this project is needed out there.
Yeah.
And that's a really big one that we have coming up. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that end of this summer we're going to get started on our first phase. So I know Kathy's working like crazy to try to get us there, and I'm trying to do the same on some of our legal agreement side.
Yeah.
We've got a number of, like I said, Wesgroup loves to build master plans. That's kind of our MO. We build big, we build long term. We're not there for just a short little one-off project. So we've got a number of big projects coming up. We've got some exciting partnerships coming up that is going to unlock even more land to develop. And when it comes to the land development side, I think I've probably already illustrated that Apple Martin's probably the best group to go with on those.
Yeah. A lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
So now the past, I don't want to go back to the past again between you guys, but what's been your favorite project that you guys have worked on together and why?
I mean, there's only really like the two mega
Yeah, just
ones.
the two big ones. Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta say, my vote goes to Canby Gardens.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the originator, and like we solved. I think because TFN was still ongoing when you left. I think with Canby Gardens, we solved a lot of the problems and went through all the things and kind of saw it at least to the end of like the first phase, which is fun.
And it's a beautiful project now.
Yeah, it's nice.
I drive along Canby all the time, and I'm really happy with how that project looks. There's still some interim things that are because it's also a bit of a master plan and it's phased out. That there's some there's a little bit of things that need to get to their final stage. But like when I drive by that project, I feel super proud because navigating all those stakeholders, like we said, the Metro Van, Hydro, COV, who all have their own competing priorities, and putting that all together and doing things like sewer separations, which is a big mandate in the city of Vancouver, and probably one that is not well understood, the requirements of them by developers and why they have to do it and what it's intended to achieve at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's a job that I drive by, and I'm really proud of what we did out there because it was a big project for Ani at the time, and there were a lot of competing demands, and it was our job to pull it all together, and I think we did.
Yeah, it was fun.
So being able, again, like you mentioned before, being able to manage kind of all of these outside voices and what everybody wants, and being able to compartmentalize it and put it all together to kind of all reach the end goal.
Yeah, and that's part of my job at Wesgroup and previously at Ani is when you're infrastructure building, there are a lot of different stakeholders between the city, the client, the third party utilities and Metro Vancouver and all that kind of stuff, and pulling all of that together and getting them all going on one path when they all want to be doing their own
They're all very
thing,
left,
and
right?
they've all got their own priority, and they don't care at all about, Hydro doesn't care about what Metro Vancouver's clearance policies are. They don't care.
Yeah.
And to pull all that together is a huge part of my job, and to keep the project progressing is a huge part of my job. And I lean on Apple Martin to aid that and to create designs that understand what all those competing priorities are and how are we going to. It's almost like an art in a way. Like how are you going to how are you going to get everybody's requirements and what everybody wants onto one design,
One sheet of paper
that is not only good enough for each stakeholder but also constructible.
Yeah, and also like cost effective too.
Totally.
yeah, it's people don't think civil engineers are creative, but there's a lot of creativity involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna say I was the same way. Like every time I drive by that site, I can't help it. I tell my wife, hey, I worked on that. And she's like, yeah, you told
That's the 20th time.
yeah,
this week
exactly,
you've mentioned
exactly.
It. Oh,
She's like,
thanks.
I know. I was like, that's so fun. It was so fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure if she's anything like my wife, she loves hearing all about
All the infrastructure. Wow, that's awesome.
Oh man. I mean, okay. Do you remember this? Is for parcel A where they forgot to leave space for the detention tank.
Oh, yeah.
And we had to
Yeah. Oh, for
jerry
sure.
rig a system that like
I know.
kind of pump and it flow
yeah,
through.
yeah, and the inverts in our storm sanitary went up and down and up and down and up and down to make that detention tank work. But that's exactly what we're talking about. Is like in a really kind of almost inherently inflexible design, because you're not really designing for the client, you're designing for everybody.
Yeah.
And because of that, there's an inflexible nature to it. We were able to still be adaptable and navigate through, what probably should have been a way more complex issue. Then we were able to make it work.
Yeah, I'm very
Kudos
proud
to
of
your
that.
team for that. Yeah.
Very proud of that.
That's awesome to hear. So I just got one more for you guys here. What is your biggest learning lesson that you've had kind of throughout your career that you bring forward that's kind of made you the developer, made you kind of the client you are today, that you would tell kind of like a younger Tom that's kind of coming into the industry and being like, hey, this happened to me once, just make sure you look out for it, and something you kind of bring forward to make you who you are today?
Oof, tough question to answer.
That is a tough question. One of the things that I've learned over, almost 12 years of doing this is you're never going to be the smartest guy in the room. You have experts that are on your side that understand. Like we put a lot of faith and trust into groups like Apple and Martin, but be prepared and, be prepared with smart questions, right? Like if you want to understand the why of a particular piece of the design, try to understand the why before you just get into asking and berating a civil engineer.
Figure it out.
Right? Like do your homework. Spend time to go, okay, if I was building this, what would it look like? What would I want it to look like? And spend the time before you step into the meeting and start trying to tear design apart or ask poignant questions of your civil engineer. Be prepared as to, okay, well, why do you think they designed it like that? And I think I've certainly found that, it's 90% of the job is just be prepared.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to have all the answers. But if you spend time trying to find out what the answers are, it makes a lot of those conversations, a lot of those meetings a lot easier to navigate.
Yeah, do a little bit of homework before and actually put in some predetermined efforts so you have, like you mentioned before, have an idea.
Yeah, and that way you can have pretty meaningful conversations with your civil engineer, who it's their job to be the expert on it.
Yeah,
but it's my job to not only ask questions and think about, well, how are we actually going to take this from a 2D piece of paper to something that we're going to construct in the field. But it's also my job to give them the tools and the resources that they need in order to build it. So like to go with that, like be prepared with what can I do to make the civil engineer's life easier so that they can focus on what I need them to focus on, which is coming up with, not only the best design possible, but smart and innovative solutions that go with it.
Right. All right, looking for me for an answer. It was like a double-edged sword because I had time to think, but also now I just thought of 100 different things I want to say. But I'll give one that's pertinent to, I guess, the theme of this, which is the client-consultant relationship, which is one thing to remember is I think as civil engineers, we always feel like we get annoyed when people are questioning our design or like whether it's the city or a client or other entity. I think the thing to remember is nobody's setting out to be wrong in any decision or conversation. Everybody is setting out to be right, and everybody thinks they're right. It's understanding the different values or objectives of every party. So I think especially for aspiring civil engineers in consulting, trying to build those client relationships, is you have to understand the objectives of your client. You have to understand what values they hold. Because like for us as civil engineers, we're trying to follow all the rules and we're trying to create like the most efficient, elegant design. Whereas, like, say we get a comment from the city that says add 5 manholes, and it's just abhorrent to us to even consider that. It's like, that's ridiculous. Why would you do that? But you know, the developers' objectives might be, we don't care. We just want approval ASAP. So you know, as a civil engineer, I need to understand that because I might add those 5 manholes that don't need to be added.
Yeah.
If that achieves the more important objectives of approval quickly, right? Which, you know, money, time is money, and that's the name of the game often. So it's just understanding that.
I guess in that way, know your client. Right?
Yeah, know your client, right? Understand, like, even just like I lecture my team on this all the time, is understand the business model of the client. Like, how do they make money, and where do the costs go, and why would they necessarily want this option over that option? You can't pick that for them if you don't know.
Yeah, zoom out and look at it from everybody's perspective, and then that way it gives you your own perspective on the issue, right?
Exactly.
Like, don't just look at it from the computer side.
Exactly.
Right? Look at it from whoever's giving you the conversation from the left and the right, right?
Exactly.
So, no, that's awesome, guys. And I'd like to thank Tom and again Robert for joining us today and sharing your stories. Sharing your story. I know you did a lot more talking on this one. You did it on the first one.
You did it for free.
But yeah, thank you again for sharing your stories, your expertise, and your knowledge on kind of the topics today. I'd like to thank our listeners of the workshop, and stay tuned for our next episode. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, great. Likewise. Thanks for tolerating it.
And that's good. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Done.